we are done with our shoot. So I will fill everybody in as our little movie comes together, hopefully in a really, really great way.
Yes.
I will have hopefully news on that in the future. My hope is that we can get some real traction at festivals out of this little thing. Very happy with how this last hectic week went, but it was all good. Very proud of my wife too.
Yeah.
So
good work.
And proud of my buddy Brant for writing and directing such a good job. Anyway, so that we'll get. Let's just dive right into it. You know why this week is special? Here's why this week is special, because we are on the verge of Avengers Endgame becoming the highest-grossing film globally of all time. It's still second place domestically and second place internationally, but it's close to getting past Avatar, and it will in a short moment. But you know what? It needed a good lead-in, and that lead-in came from Captain Marvel. And Captain Marvel is now out, and it's on 4K. Tim?
Yeah, look, this is a movie that I absolutely adore. I adore this movie. Some people were critical of this movie, but I got to tell you, the audiences loved it too, because it's actually it did well out there in the world.
Really well.
All kinds of criticism about breathe this and breathe that, and she was kind of. But you know what? She's fantastic. This is why I love Captain Marvel, though. Captain Marvel is a square-jawed badass, and she's a girl. It is clear in the context of both of these last two movies, this one and Endgame, that the strongest and most powerful, I was going to say human, but person in the universe is Captain Marvel. It's the girl.
Yeah.
And this movie knows that. This is a girl power movie straight up. Now, there's a whole storyline here. We won't get into all the ties into the end game, all the Captain, all that crap is in this movie. I don't care about any of that crap. What I care about in this movie is this badass girl and her badass girlfriend and her badass girlfriend's daughter roaming around this movie, just kicking man booty, just every place they go. She plays this with a certain little a curl in her lip there, a little snarl, and I love that. A twinkle in her eye. I love all of that. There's a sequence in these movies that I adore. I'm going to let you describe the sequence, because it brings me to tears.
It does me too, because I'm the daddy of a daughter. It is the ultimate girl power sequence, because and hopefully you've seen it. We're not giving anything away. If it is, fast forward 15 seconds. But where it is every moment in her life when she has ever been down and out, and it's all cut together, and it is picking it up, dusting yourself off, and getting ready to just lay into it one more time. Never let them keep you down. Always stand up again.
And it's just so beautiful the way they do it.
Beautiful.
We see her with she off the bike and the go-kart. She gets hurt
in baseball.
She's hurt, bleeding to the skin, leg, all kinds of. And then they do this bright thing. They wait a long time. And you get to the back of this movie, and we see the back end of every one of those moments in her life. When she fell off this, when she hit that. We see her get up with that little smile, grab that baseball bat, and go do it again. And that's just the theme for life as far as I'm concerned. And that they wrap it all into this little girl, and then they take that little girl, and they make that little girl the strongest being in the universe. That's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Just wonderful in every possible way.
It is now. There's a kind of a refugee themed story that that doesn't pull its weight entirely, but that's okay. It doesn't need to, because here's what I think sets this film apart from all the other superhero films, Marvel or otherwise. Almost every single one, 201, begins by telling you the origin. How Krypton exploded and Superman came here as a kid. How Batman's parents were shot and he, blah, blah. How Peter Parker got bit by the spider. How Tony Stark went into the cave and, on and on and on. Every single one of them. How Wonder Woman found her way off the island and then became blah, blah. It's always the same. That's not what this is about. When it starts, she is already who she is.
She's a fully self-actualized woman.
Badass
woman. Air Force fighter pilot.
It's not the story of how she became who she is. It's the story of her finding out who she was. And that is so interesting.
Yeah, and then she has to wrap that into a personality she always has. Who I was is going to have to work for who I am now.
Yep, that's it.
Another little neat thing going on in this movie, it plays on our expectations about what things look like. You're watching this movie, and there's these bad guys. These bad guys, at least you're bad, and they look a certain way, and you must be the bad guys. And good guys, they must look a certain way. And this movie messes with that expectation, and it pokes you for that. And I like that about this movie too. It's a very sharp movie. That I thought was just well done all the way around.
Sensational 4K too.
Oh, this 4K and tons of bonus material. Literally, it says on the box, tons of bonus material. Right there, 4K and the Blu-ray, deleted scenes, gag reel, just all kinds of stuff. More stuff you can think about, audio commentaries, and much, much more. So, I would say that if you're taking a leap for the first time into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're like, do I want to watch all of these movies? What are there, like 22 of these movies if you start counting with Iron Man?
22 of them, yeah.
And you're like, I'm not watching 22 movies. Where do I start? I'm like, start here.
Yeah,
start with Captain Marvel and then watch Endgame. You will see, hear, speak to
because chronologically that takes place before the others.
Before the others, anyway.
With the exception of Captain America,
because this is set in the 80s, right? Some Captain America is set in the 40s
World War II,
or whatever. But this takes place in the 80s. But start here, and you'll get all of these people. And then, if you're intrigued after you watch this, and perhaps Endgame, go back and start with Iron Man. And work your way forward through.
You can skip Iron Man 2.
You can skip Iron Man 2. Yeah, that didn't work at all. Norm of the North, a king-sized adventure. These Norm films, I don't know. How does your baby respond to the Norm?
Not at all.
Not at all. Not her
Not
thing.
at all.
She's princesses. She's all about princesses.
That's it. Just Disney princesses. She doesn't even want to go to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge.
Really?
No, doesn't want to. Do you know that?
Technically, there's a princess in that movie.
Now, hold on. Let me just back. Did you know, which is open now, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which they spent $1 billion on. They've spent $1 billion on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And I'm thinking, okay, great. I'm dying to see what rides they've got. Do you realize that Star Wars Galaxy's Edge has a sum total of one new ride?
Yeah,
it's one ride.
Yeah, it's a whole interactive thing. They say the new kids don't like to get in the little cart and just ride around and look at stuff. They want to go poke stuff and hit stuff. So that's why they only did the one ride. That's what they say. I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, I haven't been yet, but I'm thinking one ride. Well, all I want to do what else is there to do but rides?
Yeah.
So, but I guess there's places where you go and people talk to you and there are things and this and that, and you have conversations with the characters, and you go to the cantina and they warn you. Like it becomes a role playing thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not into that.
I'm not into that either. I went up to Universal.
Yeah.
When they had like the backdraft thing, and they just put you on a cart. People have done this before, and you just roam through the thing. You had no interactiveness at all. And there you are. Right. There's King Kong, and here comes the Waterworld exhibit, and you see the stuff. It all happened around you. Yeah. But apparently the new kids don't like that kind of stuff. Anyway, not much happening on this Norm of the North DVD. So if you like the first one, you like that one, whatever. Anthony Hopkins and Julianne Moore and Hannibal. Man, oh man, oh man.
4K now.
It's in 4K. I think we talked about it
a couple weeks ago.
We go on DVD, right?
Yeah.
So this is 4K. Looks fantastic. Doesn't make the movie any better is what the problem is. I mean, coming off Silence of the Lambs, this was mediocre by comparison. I read both of those books, and it was the same thing with the book.
Really?
Yeah, the same thing with the book. It was much bigger, broader, all of that. But and I had the same image in my head. This doesn't even have Jodie Foster. Got nothing against Julianne Moore, but Jodie Foster simply imprinted that character for us, Scott Glenn, and all that stuff. And this seemed to be more of a horror movie. Than Silence of the Lambs, which was a crime movie.
Yeah,
this was about getting to that scene at the end of the movie. Nevertheless, full of all kinds of special features, audio commentaries from Ridley Scott, the making of, Anatomy of a Shootout, etc., and a 33 minutes of deleted and alternate scenes. That's interesting. With optional director commentary on the deleted scenes as well. So I'm rather interested in that, including an alternate ending, also with optional director's commentary. Would be interested in seeing that. So Hannibal, man, that's what year did Hannibal come out?
Oh man,
2001, dude.
Yeah,
2001. Yeah. I remember seeing Silence of the Lamb. Bridget was in St. Louis.
Yeah,
went to the screen, did the junket and everything. Silence of the Lamb. I think that's about 91, 92, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And I saw Silence of the Lambs, and I was so ridiculously giddy.
Yeah,
I just had to go home and tell. I called back then. You had to make an actual phone call. And I woke her up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to tell her about Silence of the Lambs. Are you insane? You wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell me about some scary ass movie?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, babe. Jason Statham, Amy Smart, and Crank. I rather enjoyed Crank. I think they made another 2 or 3 Cranks, at least one more Crank. Didn't care for those two.
I just don't get the whole Crank thing. I get it. I mean, I understand what they're going for. It's so not enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. The first one I rather dug. Plus, Amy Smart was in it. I was kind of nuts about her.
Yeah. For a moment.
The guy gets the car. Don't look in the trunk. One of those kind of things.
Yeah.
And it's Jason doing his thing. So what are you gonna do? This does not have. This is 4K, 2-disc Blu-ray with a few special features. The shooting of Crank, stunts, the stunts of Crank, pushing Crank, Crank at Comic-Con, that kind of thing. So if you're into the series, this is the one to have, and probably the one that you would like the most. John Goodman, Vera Farmiga in captive state. Very
Didn't see this. How was? I heard mixed things about this.
Well, and you heard correctly. So what do you? So this is an extraterrestrial invasion movie. It's been like 10 years since these extraterrestrials occupied planet Earth, started deceiving humanity into thinking that they came in peace. We come in peace. It was one of those kind of things. Okay. They did not come in peace. They did not come in peace at all. And this is all about how that goes after that. And bonus features include a featurette. The building of the world. There is a good deal of interesting cinematography here and set pieces. Vera Farmiga is actually pretty good in this movie. Vera happens to be in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, kind of playing the same character, the same part as she's playing here. What do you think about that Warner Brothers trilogy that starts with Godzilla, 2014, goes to Kong, Skull Island, because everybody has to have one now. This was theirs. We already saw the Universal world collapse. They were going to do the monster movies. I don't think anybody else can pull it off.
I don't see it working. I just don't see it working. I mean, I like even Pacific Rim, which I loved. The Pacific Rim sequel, can't really keep it going.
Didn't do it.
To make these quote unquote universes work the way that Marvel's works, you have to fall in love with the characters. It's not about the monsters. It's not about the creatures. It's not even about the superhero-ness. It's like it's the fact that we always point about Endgame. The best scenes in Endgame are scenes where there are two people talking to each other.
Yep, not the fighting, not the big battles.
It's
not. The best scenes in Endgames are when the movie's a drama.
Yeah,
and of course, Endgame. I know we talked about it already. The wonderful thing to watch for an Endgame is this: watch for the love stories. Mm-hmm. Every conceivable kind of love story that you could, fathers and sons and daughters, husband and wives, boyfriend, girlfriend. It's nothing but love stories. And everything that these characters are doing in Endgame, they're doing not really to save the world or the universe. The universe was destroyed in the other movie.
That's right.
They failed at that already.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is to save the loves of their lives. One-on-one. Gotta save my baby. That's what I'm doing. Yep. And that's why that's such a wonderful movie.
It's brilliant. Yeah, and it's going to get nominated for Best Picture, I think. I do.
Yeah.
All right.
Black Panther sort of cracked that nut a while ago. Yes, right? Where are we going?
Let's see. We're done with all the new movies. Boy, that was quick. I'm going to hit some foreign right now. We have a bunch of foreign that has piled up. I am going to start off with a film that was Oscar nominated very deservedly this year, Never Look Away. Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck's new film. He won previously for The Lives of Others, then made a really bad Johnny Depp movie, then went back to Germany and spent several years putting together another 3-hour movie. He makes long movies. He takes a long time to make them, but they are all really, really, really stinking great. The Never Look Away is an old-fashioned classic war melodrama. It is just beautifully put together. It blows by. It's 3 hours that it feels like 90 minutes. It's a wonderful movie. And it is loosely based on, who is the German artist whose name I can't remember. Hold on. There's an actual German artist. Gerhard Richter. That's it. So Gerhard Richter is the artist whose work this is loosely based on, but it's very loosely based. This is not Gerhard Richter's life. It's just sort of his artwork inspired this story. But it's the story of a young German painter who, and his experience both from before World War II during the war and right into the communist East German aftermath of the war. Over that entire period, his romance with the love of his life, whose father was a Nazi physician and is a Nazi physician and winds up being a communist physician. And it's an extraordinary saga, and it's an absolutely wonderful movie, beautifully acted in every conceivable way. And it's an almost perfect film. It's an old-fashioned film, though. It really, really feels like something from, that would have happened and been made in the 1960s. Tom Schilling plays the lead part. Paula Beer, his love. Sebastian Koch plays his father-in-law. It's a terrific movie. Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck, by the way, largest man making movies. And by large, I mean, no, he's not as wide as Guillermo del Toro. He's large in that sense, but Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck has to be like 6'6", 6'7", or something.
A big man.
He's a big man. He's like the biggest German that I have seen this side of Nowitzki in the NBA. He is a big man. So he owns the room. In any case, this was also nominated for an Academy Award for cinematography, very deservedly, too. So, wonderful movie. It's on Blu-ray from Sony Pictures Classics, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Another great foreign language film, Return of the Hero. This is from Distrib Films. It's not on Blu-ray. It needs to be on Blu-ray. I urge Distrib Films to send this to us on Blu-ray. I wish this would have gotten a theatrical release here, too. It is so unbelievably funny. Anybody who knows this show knows I adore Jean Dujardin. He's genius. Whether it's the artist, whether it's playing OSS 117.
Moves, yeah.
He plays a similar character here. This is a wonderful classic French farce. And it is so great. And it has Melanie Laurent in it as well, who is not only a great actress, but a great director. And so here's the premise. This is during the Napoleonic era. It's 1809. And Jean Dujardin is is engaged to it's almost a Jane
detective?
The great
Jane Austen.
Jane Austen.
Yeah.
It's almost a Jane Austen scenario too. It's like Jane Austen crossed with Moliere. So here's the thing: it's 1809. Jean Dujardin is a great military man in Napoleon's army, and he's going off to war. He's going off, and he's going to come back a hero, right? And so he's going to write. He's going to write to Melanie Laurent's little sister, to whom he's engaged, and they're going to wait for him. And it's going to be wonderful. And when he comes back, and meanwhile, while he's gone, he doesn't write. He writes nothing. He's a complete cad. And so Melanie Laurent takes it upon herself, because her sister is inconsolable. She starts writing phony letters on his behalf for the sake of her sister. Explain, I'm such a hero, and I did this, and I did that, and I did this, and the other thing, and so forth, and so on. Finally, he comes back, but he comes back as a deserter. He's a bum. He's a loser.
Wow.
He's just a complete. He ran away. He's a disgrace. But she says, no, you are going to play the part, and you're not going to disappoint my sister. So he winds up doing a Cyrano de Bergerac type deal with himself. He now has to actually step into the heroic character that Melanie Laurent created for him, and he starts adding and embellishing and making up all this additional stuff, right? Well, of course, as anybody with a brain knows, these two go from hating each other in Taming of the Shrew style to eventually, falling in love. Right, but it is just two great actors and a wonderful premise, and it is so beautifully executed. And I had so much fun with this movie. I can't tell you how fun this is. I love this movie. It is absolutely great. It's called Return of the Hero from Distrib Films. I can't say enough great stuff about it. All right, and then we've also got some really, really wonderful Kino releases here. Kino foreign language releases. One is The Nun by Jacques Rivette. And the other is La Prisonnière, otherwise known as The Woman in Chains, by Henri-Georges Clouzot, two of the greatest French directors of all time. Neither of these are their very, very best films, but they're both really, really good films. They're both from the 60s. La Prisonnière is from 68, and The Nun is from 1965. And they are just classic French films of the era. La Prisonnière has a lot of really, really kind of funky psychedelic stuff in it, which is very, very much what Clouzot was doing at the time. It's sort of like what he was doing in Inferno or L'Enfer. that never happened. That was, his unfinished film. It's got a lot of stuff in it that he was trying to master in the other film. So it's an interesting contrast here. It gets into some very, very interesting kind of S&M type imagery and ideas, and some very, very psychedelic visuals. But ultimately, it's really just a love triangle, except with a really, really funky 60s veneer on it. But it's beautifully done. Has Kat Ellinger, the film historian, with a commentary, and that's all very good. The Nun it has a lot of very, very classic Rivette stuff in it. This was originally banned in France because it's very, very, very controversial religious material. But Anna Karina, better known for all of her stuff with Godard when she was married to Godard, it plays the title character, who is basically like a horror film. She's it's like Rosemary's Baby, except instead of being pushed into a satanic cult, she's pushed into a convent, and the life that entails. Liselette Pulver plays a really terrifying Mother Superior. And I think this was banned for at least 5 or 6 years in France, and wasn't even seen over here until a number of years after that. So anyway, it's a really, really cool film, and it's got a great essay and an audio commentary by Nick Pinkerton, and that's recommended as well. Let's see, a few other foreign language. Oh, you know what? We gotta get to these. The Retro Afrika collection, the Retro Afrika line from IndiePix, keeps finding really, really interesting films. They have added another 6 to the Retro Afrika collection, and these are all still really, really great films. Definitely worth checking out. These films have a very hard time getting here because they're from countries that just don't have the connections to necessarily get their films sold internationally. So it's nice to get them. From South Africa, we have Isiboshwa. I hope I'm not mutilating that. Isiboshwa. This is from 1989, so it predates the Nollywood industry and comes from what they call Sollywood. I didn't even know South Africa had this, but they call it Sollywood, and it's about 3 young boys on a camping trip, and the unusual and difficult and challenging things that happen to them on the camping trip. And then also from South Africa, from 1980, is Hostage, which is a blackmail story, and it deals with the crime culture in South Africa in a very, very challenging way. It is this copes with the apartheid level, the apartheid era, in a very aggressive, challenging way. Very, 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 very impressive film. Also from South Africa, 1985's Rich Girl, which is a little bit like The Bodyguard done South Africa style. This is one of the weaker films of this. This is also an apartheid-era film, also very, very well acted and worth checking out. Revenge from 1985, a Zulu language film from South Africa. A period film, takes place in what you might call their Western period, and it's I guess I could analogize it maybe a little bit to Sounder. It's got elements of that. It's sort of a fable about kindness and a mysterious stranger, and it's an interesting depiction of a period in South African history that is not often depicted. From 1984 are the last 2 of these, again, also from South Africa. Charlie Steele and the Comedians, and both of them very, very interesting. Charlie Steele is about a ransom story about a guy who's kind of like he's like a private investigator. He's he's the guy that you call, right? If you want to, he has a little bit of a history, but he's the guy that you want to call to get things fixed. And but it's not exactly an action film. It's not exactly a suspense film. It's got a different angle to it. It winds up being more of a social commentary. And The Comedians is not exactly a funny film. I wouldn't call this a comedy. This is also Zulu language, and it's about maybe a low-budget Lord of the Rings would be a way to put it. Yeah. It's about a ring, the obsession with a ring, a certain man's obsession with the ring, and the people that he hires to try to retrieve the ring. So you might call him a South African Gollum in some respect, but it touches on many of the same themes, and it's very, very good. And it has, well, look, look at the artwork.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has kind of a comic book thing going, and I love
Quite literal is what it is.
Yeah, I like the tagline. Not all magic rings bring good fortune. It's very, very cool. So,
Almost none of them do, really.
No, they don't.
Almost
do they?
none of them.
Never. And then let's see, on the foreign language front, I got a few others here, but let me just let me pull out a couple. Oh yeah, here we're gonna do this. We're gonna do these two. I'll do these three. We'll push those others off to another week. The Captain is a Robert Schwenke film. Robert Schwenke, a very, very talented filmmaker. One of the best current German filmmakers. He made The Captain. This has been released on Blu-ray by Music Box, and it is a dazzling looking film. It is a spectacular story that takes place at the very, very end of World War II, and it centers around a German deserter, a deserter from the German army, who winds up impersonating a German officer through circumstances that are really, really interesting, and is able to then begin to get people to listen to him and follow his commands. And that hence he becomes the captain of the title. And it takes you probably a bit of time watching this because we're so conditioned to look at World War II films, especially those that deal with Nazism and the Holocaust, in a very, very dark light. It takes you probably about 15 to 20 minutes to be okay with laughing at some stuff in this film, because you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
There is an absurdist strain to it, but it takes a minute to sort of acclimate to that. Just the same, it is stunning black and white photography. It is an absolutely beautiful film, and widescreen. It's really, really quite powerful. And it has a number of extras. Robert Schwenke does a commentary. There are behind-the-scenes featurettes, interviews, even a storyboard to film comparison. It's quite a movie. It's quite a movie. So that is The Captain. And then the last two that I have here, one is Memoir of War, French film, which has Mélanie Thierry in it. And this is based on the life of Marguerite Duras. It is directed by Emmanuel Finkiel. And Marguerite Duras's books have been made into many movies, including The Lover and a number of others. And this is the first one that deals specifically with her as a character, her wartime experience. And it is quite extraordinary. I had no idea that much of this actually happened, that her husband was arrested by the Gestapo and taken to Dachau. I mean, it's on and on and on. It's really quite extraordinary. And if you know her work, especially if you know Hiroshima Mon Amour, you're going to start to see a lot of the origins of those things in this story. And it is actually a very, very good film. It played a number of festivals, including our Kolkoa here locally. And it's just absolutely wonderful. It's called Memoir of War. In French, it was La Douleur. And the last one here is Gaspar Noé's Climax.
Gaspar, who am I?
I hate Gaspar Noé.
Yeah, he's problematic.
He's out of his mind. He's completely insane, and so is this movie.
Argentine filmmaker Gaspar.
Yeah, it makes his movies in France, but yes,
makes his movies in France.
Yeah. So here's the okay. Here's the premise here. Look, Gaspar Noé just hates audiences. He does. He makes movies that attack you and assault you. What was the one of his that was set in Tokyo? That whole Neo Tokyo.
Enter the Void.
Enter the Void. Yeah. So I knew he and I were not copacetic with that scene in Enter the Void when I was treated sitting in the New Art Theater to a giant 50-foot widescreen image of the point of view from inside a woman's cervix of a penis being thrust into my face. Now, I thought, you have got to be one deranged lunatic to actually think that this is in any way appropriate for anybody. Nobody wants to see this. Why are you doing this to me?
Actually, his most disturbing scene made a film called Irreversible. That opening scene.
The rape scene.
The rape scene in Irreversible.
It's awful.
All of these moments are intentional on the part of Gaspar.
Because he hates people.
What Lars? He's in the vein of Lars.
Yeah, exactly.
In the vein of Julian.
He wants to shock.
Yeah, so yeah.
So here's what Climax spends about a half an hour, feels like a half an hour, might be 20 minutes, whatever it is, it's too damn long. Spends about 20 minutes with dancers just giving you interviews, just talking to the camera. And you think, is this a documentary? What the hell is this? I don't understand. There's dancers, they're talking and they're not dancing. And then you move to this abandoned warehouse where the dancers are rehearsing for some kind of a postmodern, avant-garde modern dance number, and it's all this real funky dance. It's like you're like, okay, well, the dancing's kind of cool, but what's going on? I still don't see a movie here. And then here we go. Now the dancing's over, and now it turns out somebody spiked the punch with LSD. So now everybody's had the punch. Everybody starts hallucinating. Everybody goes crazy. And now for the next, it's got to be a good 50, 55, 60 minutes, you have people who are literally torturing each other to death in this place. It becomes just a torture chamber. There's no story. No. It's just a mess. People running around screaming, having sex, taking their clothes off, murdering each other. It's just a horrible, dreadful film. Gaspar Noé, the man should be condemned.
I took LSD once. Nothing like that happened. Basically, I saw giant daisies. That's just pretty much just the whole scene, man. A little TV.
Yeah, let's do TV.
I'll knock off a little bit of the foreign television first. Sara Stein, From Berlin to Tel Aviv, complete series, which is consists of 4 films, really, on 2 DVDs. This film. So this is a fairly thrilling crime drama about a young Jewish detective who works in Berlin. Solving cases, kind of a loner, doing her thing, taking care of the crime. A Israeli DJ visiting from Tel Aviv is murdered.
Okay.
And she has to sort of go into that, and it becomes very clear off the top that something about his murder is definitely related to the fact that he's from Israel, that he's Jewish. She has to. It's the first time that she ever has to bring her Jewishness with her and call upon it and her understanding of being a Jewish person, and able to solve a crime. She goes to Tel Aviv, and it gets really dark and serious and complicated. It's very interesting television show. I love this show in the way that it looks. It's relatively speaking monochromatic. Mostly only the flesh tones are in color, and every now and again maybe a scarf or something like that will be a muted sort of red or something like that. But it lives in these sort of like blues and greens. And it's just really sort of striking to watch. And the storyline is, it's extremely apropos as we look at the Jewish community today, and we see that Jewish community has been coming under attack for several years now. Underlying all of that, that is the underlying theme, I should say, in what's going on in this Sara Stein, From Berlin to Tel Aviv, the complete series. Quite good. Series 3 of Delicious, A Scandal in Every Bite. Delicious. This is so wonderful, mostly because Dawn French is in it, the wonderful Dawn French from French and Saunders.
Love Dawn French.
A writer on Absolutely Fabulous. So anyway, she's fantastic on this. So this is the story of Don's character, who's married to this guy who runs this fancy hotel called the Penrose Hotel. It's a very famous hotel, mostly famous because of the cooking, and the cooking is mostly her cooking. Nevertheless, her husband gets all the credit for everything that's going on. He cheats on her, runs off with some younger gal. As is expected to happen in these things, when the younger gal gets the sense that her husband is cheating on her, obnoxiously she goes to Dawn French's character Gina to talk to her about it. What are the signs of when your husband and Dawn, and I'm going to give this away now because it's not relevant to the series. And Dawn says, "Here's the sign. I'm the woman that your husband is cheating on you with." Because what goes around comes around. This is the neat part. He dies. And we get into sort of like what was that series from back in the 30s where the ghosts are watching, the Ghosted Mrs. Bureau or something like that? No, where the ghosts are watching the family as they sort of go along in their lives. It's wonderful. I can't remember exactly. You know the one I'm talking about.
You're talking about Topper?
Topper.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we have a sort of Topper thing going on with the dead husband sort of watching his wife and his new wife or his ex-wife or his late wife, his widowed wife, and I guess they're both widows of him at this point, run this hotel that he built and run it better than he ever did. And it's really sort of very, very funny and very sweet. Behind the scenes, a featurette on this particular one from Series 3, Delicious, kind of cool. From Acorn TV, an original series here called Blood. The Ties to Dawn. This is a fairly neat little mini series. A young woman It has to go back to her hometown after her mother suddenly dies. She gets back to town. She meets where her father and her siblings are, and all of the town folks that she so desperately wanted to get away from years ago. And she starts to get the details on what happened to her mother, and they don't add up. Indeed, she starts to feel like her father, a doctor, might have had something to do with her mother's death. Now, this owes to something traumatic that happened between her father and her when she was a much younger person that suggests he might be capable of something like that. It's really, really good. It's right in the tradition of something like Broadchurch or The Killings or all those things like that. So one of those just crunchy dramas. Bonus material include cast and crew interviews and a behind the scenes featurette, which is pretty neat. London Kills, again from Acorn Television, Series 1, London Kills. This is, again, another gritty British drama from the folks that brought us Suspect.
Yep.
And all of that. So this one, London's most elite murder investigation team. It solves all the big crimes. The leader of that team takes a long leave as our series is beginning, and he's just coming back from that long leave. The long leave is based on the fact that his wife went missing. And has not been found yet. Now, while he's been gone, a young woman has sort of taken over the investigations, leading the team, and she does things very differently than him. And he is, of course, still somewhat obsessed with the fact of his missing wife, a case that hasn't been solved. So here's a guy who's supposed to be leading London's most top crime-solving team, yet he has not solved the crime, of his own missing wife. Really, really interesting sort of layered thing you got going on right there. This is Series 1, behind the scenes featurette. It's what you got. The featurette is as long as 2 episodes of this show, so it's kind of neat to really fill you in on what's going on. Good British crime drama. You just can't get enough of it as far as I'm concerned.
Sweet. I like British crime.
Yeah.
I do. I like Irish crime better. Well, I don't like the crime. I like the crime show.
Yeah, with better accent. You want to go with some of those for a while?
Yeah, let's split the TV up and then jump through some of this other stuff. Just kind of keep it interesting. Got a bunch from Arrow, and they just keep coming up with great stuff. Yakuza Law is obviously a Yakuza film. This is by Teruo Ishii. One of the lesser-known filmmakers here, even though his films are well-known. He made Blind Woman's Curse, which has a certain profile, and he made a lot of these kinds of films. He's a really good action director, really good genre director, and this takes place in the Edo period. It is it's essentially a How best to put this? This is like the origins of the Yakuza might be the best way to say this. It's like it splits the difference between a modern day Yakuza film, which tend to be modern day organized crime films, and the samurai movie, which is its own separate story. So this is like a Yakuza samurai hybrid movie, and it gets into it touches on all of the very interesting. The aspects of the samurai code that find their way into the modern day Yakuza. It's actually interesting. It's one of the few films that really kind of gets into a lot of those overlaps, and it has a great '60s vibe to it. It's got a real cool look. 1969 was when this was made. Yakuza Law. A lot of extras on it, by the way. She Devils on Wheels also has tons and tons of extras. This is a Herschel Gordon Lewis film. It's one of the few Herschel Gordon Lewis movies from his post-Nudie Cutie period that is not a gore film. This is 1968, 69, and it's not exactly a pleasant movie. It's a biker chick movie, but it's still fun. It's weird and it's a little bit campy, and it's got that whole '60s vibe to it. Also has an audio commentary with Herschel Gordon Lewis and Mike Vraney of Something Weird, who was very kind to us when we made our documentary Schlock. And a whole bunch of other really, really cool extras on here, including Garage Punk Gore, which is a discussion of the music and the movies of Herschel Gordon Lewis by Chris Alexander, who is a musician. The other two, Trapped Alive, a movie I had never heard of before, but apparently this has a real culty following. This is also from the late 80s, 1988. And it's about a couple of, two friends who are on their way to a Christmas party, and they get carjacked by these guys who just recently escaped from prison. And then a bunch of even stupider things happen, and somehow they wind up in a mine shaft with a bunch of cannibals. And it makes no sense whatsoever. It's very weird. It's very silly. But it has a following. So I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to say Trapped Alive for genre fans. Maybe your thing. This is the one that I really, really want to talk about. This is the best Arrow release we've had in a long time. The Andromeda Strain, Robert Wise's adaptation of the book by Michael Crichton, that really kind of put him on the map as a guy. Andromeda Strain is what said, wow, this guy has a real dystopian view. And of course, he continued to work that until the end of time, all the way to Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. The things that can go wrong when human beings misuse science. But the Andromeda Strain is a really, really interesting and still very timely film in terms of what it says about viruses and how we handle viruses. And every single time I hear about some new virus, every time there's an Ebola outbreak or there's a tick and a Lyme disease issue somewhere, or a spotted fever something or other, or mad cow disease, I always think of the Andromeda Strain. Douglas Trumbull, who had just done 2001: A Space Odyssey, was responsible for the special effects and does a remarkable job. This is really, really a first-rate film. Robert Wise, of course, was trying to turn the corner and do something different from what had been done, from what he did in both Sound of Music and West Side Story. He was getting to be known really as like the musical guy. Wanted to do something different and showed a more serious side of himself. There's a lot on here. There's a PDF of the original on the BD-ROM portion of this. If you put it in your computer or you put it in a drive that your computer can read, you will see in the BD-ROM portion a PDF of the original cine script with diagrams and production designs and all kinds of stuff. It's really super cool. And interviews here with all kinds of featurettes, audio commentary by a film critic. It's just some wonderful, wonderful stuff. But it's a great transfer. It's a fantastic Blu-ray. The Andromeda Strain from Arrow on Blu-ray.
Good. A few more over here.
Yeah, do the Rewind collection.
I love this. I love the 90s stuff. First of all, I think I did the junket for every single one of these movies. I certainly reviewed them all. Got a couple of Jean-Claude Van Damme's here. First one from 1991, I believe, Double Impact. Folks will remember this. You got two times the Jean-Claude in one. This was a fun movie, and I just remember the conceit of it being kind of neat. So you have these babies, twin brothers who are parted at birth when their parents are brutally killed. Years later, they couldn't be. One guy's a Beverly Hills sort of a fitness instructor. The other guy's just sort of grungy guy who's smuggling drugs or whatever. They're smuggling stolen items, actually, is what it is on the street. They sort of come together. The bad guys after the dark brother. And the one thing that they have in common is that they both can fight. Nice. So you have these wonderful scenes of Jean-Claude fighting next to Jean-Claude. You know what's neat? Neither one of the Jean-Claudes can say a believable word of dialogue. Neither Chad nor his brother can say believable dialogue.
So here's what I remember. Here's what I remember about that movie. I remember nothing about the movie, but I remember the junket.
Yeah.
And here's what I remember about the junket. I remember at the junket, I'm sitting there at the Westwood Marquis Hotel, which is something else now. I think you lived around the corner.
Around
at
the corner, yeah, in Westwood.
And so I'm sitting there with Rod Lurie.
Yeah, Rod, yeah.
And he and I used to have this running thing because we had the same cassette recorder, exact same model of Sony cassette recorder we used to record junkets. And I'm sitting there with Rod Lurie and like 2 or 3 other reporters, reviewers from other publications. I don't even remember. I remember one of them. She was young and she was blonde, and you know where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. And Van Damme, I could ask him a question, and he would do this to me. He'd like look at me, kind of give me a token look, and then he'd start leering at her. And I'd keep talking like, am I chopped liver here? What's going on? And then he would say something like this. He'd go, I'm sorry, but she's so beautiful. No? Is she not so beautiful? Is she not so beautiful? Like he just starts hitting on. It was like a Me Too moment, right there in the room.
Oh, it was a Me Too moment.
and you could tell she just starts blushing, and she's completely put on the spot. Doesn't know how to react. He goes, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. He kept saying that the whole time. And then afterwards, Rod Lurie and I were trying to sort of wash the ick off of us. And we were standing on the sidewalk in front of the Westwood Marquee. And Rod says this to me, and he goes, and he says, you know, these film critic organizations, and he hadn't yet been admitted to LAFCA. He then was admitted to LAFCA and then left LAFCA before we got in.
Mm-hmm.
But he said these film, you know, somebody should start like a broadcast film critics group. And that was the birth. I was standing there, which is now, of course, the Critics' Choice.
Critics' Choice Awards.
I literally was the first person to hear Rod Lurie's idea before that emerged as a Broadcast Film Critics Association. I was the first person to hear the idea.
I think Joey Berlin had.
He and Joey founded it.
They
together.
founded the Broadcast.
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he and Joey, I think they still play poker every weekend together.
No, those guys. You know, a friend of Sherm's, you know, Rod.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
they go way back. Another Jean-Claude Van Damme with, of course, the stunning and amazing actor Dennis Rodman, who were not making Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. Played a little basketball for the Detroit Pistons for a while there,
and the
Lakers. Although he was better when he was with Detroit. Double Team. This is the wackiest movie ever. Again, reviewed this movie. Did the junk. Dennis Rodman. I think he was done with his career by then. This is 97.
Oh yeah, Troy Huck directed this.
Yeah.
Brief step
over from Hong Kong, right? And you know, wacky action movie. Mickey Rourke also in the movie. Van Damme is a special operations guy. Dennis was some sort of a drug dealer. So I remember one big badass fight scene in that stadium. Yeah. And Dennis is doing like the crane pose or something from whatever it is, and all kinds of fake karate and kung fu, because Dennis Rodman doesn't know karate and kung fu, but nevertheless, there it is. And the thing is, I guess the hook of this thing is Dennis Rodman 6'10", I think he was. Yeah. And they played on that sort of thing of his, the length and all the fight scenes. Other than that, this is a perfectly ludicrous film that you don't really want to mess with. Also from the 90s, Pauly Shore. Pauly Shore had this run in the 90s, Encino Man, and this, that, and the other thing, and including one called Biodome. I remember Biodome. But this particular one is called Jury Duty.
Oh, dear. I remember this.
And again, knocked out the junket. I ran into Pauly Shore like 2 or 3 times a month. Just dumb Pauly Shore movies over at the Comedy Store. And this particular one is about this guy. He's on jury duty. It's a big important case. I think it's like a capital murder case or something like that. He's a down and out loser, as Pauly always played down and out losers. So he tries to keep the jury hung for as long as it can possibly be hung, so that he can get that $15 a day. Murderer be damned. Look, they really should put special features on these. I love this because
Pauly's dad just died.
It was kind of a bummer. We used to run into him all the time. I used to do that.
I still remember you interviewed Pauly at one point, and I think you said that his bio said he was like 35. I remember you said to him something like, dude, you were 35 5 years ago the last time I interviewed you.
You kidding me? I said, there's a picture of you standing next to Elvis in '63. What the hell's going on? Yeah. Come on. You look the same age. Dana Carvey used to be a movie star, made a few decent movies, and then he made a few bad movies. This is one of the not particularly good ones. Dana Carvey in Opportunity Knocks. Dana's career just went completely and totally spinning out of control. But he had a little moment coming off Saturday Night Live.
Had a moment. They all have that moment.
Dana was actually pretty good on Saturday Night Live. A few interesting characters and all that kind of stuff. Opportunity Knocks. He's this con man on the run from some bad guys. Breaks into this fancy house. Robert Loggia, the wonderful Robert Loggia, the father of the guy who owns the house, mistakes him for the house sitter. So he starts pretending like he's a hoity-toity sort of Harvard grad and ends up running one of Robert Loggia. These movies, if I had known you could actually make money writing movies like that, I'd have written a dozen of them and have a different life now. The bonus features include deleted scenes. I actually love this 1997 Alicia Silverstone movie, post Clueless and all of that. I was a big fan of Alicia Silverstone for quite a while, actually. She was pretty good to me. With a fairly young Benicio del Toro in the movie. It's called Excess Baggage. So this movie, both Silverstone and del Toro are incredibly funny. And they have this very bizarre chemistry that really worked well, despite the fact that even then he was probably 10 years older than her. So she's this rich, girl hanging around Beverly Hills doing her thing, her father ignoring her all the time. So she stages her own kidnap. Except that the car that she locked herself in the trunk of to stage the kidnapping actually gets stolen by Benicio del Toro's character. So now she has been kidnapped. Of course, he doesn't want her. He just wants the car. So he's like, you just get out of the car. You're not kidnapped. Go home. She's like, no. I'm doing a kidnapping, and you're my kidnapper, and I promise you, anybody who I says you kidnap, they're gonna believe me and not you, and this is what we're doing. And it's just all about how she hijacks this whole entire situation in order to get back at Daddy. It's funny. I'm sorry, and I will remind folks right now that both Roger and Ebert gave this movie a thumbs up.
Oh, Ebert and Siskel.
Yeah, Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
Yes, Siskel. Yeah, I said Roger and Ebert. Siskel and
Yeah.
Ebert both gave this movie a thumbs up. You
Wow.
know, sometimes our movie fall off our radar. You know, people probably haven't thought about this in years. You know,
Weird.
but thumbs
All right.
up. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to do the some Twilight Time and Criterions, then we'll get back to TV, finish off at TV, and we'll see what else we have time for. Got a wonderful quartet of Twilight Time titles this week. You can get all of these by going to twilightimemovies.com or screenarchives.com. The first one is Morituri, which is about basically almost takes place entirely on a freighter, a German freighter that's supposed to deliver rubber. It's on its way from Japan, from Yokohama, to Bordeaux in France, and Marlon Brando plays a German deserter that the Allies have recruited. Yul Brynner is the captain of the ship, and it's a little bit Hunt for Red October-y. Forget about the rubber. The rubber is a MacGuffin. It's a good suspense thriller. It's a good war thriller. It's a little claustrophobic, but you're really watching it for Yul Brynner and Marlon Brando. That's why you're watching it. It's like a lot of these war movies from the mid 1960s. You're a generation after World War II, so there's a little bit of romantic perspective, and almost all these movies, from The Great Escape to Dirty Dozen, they all kind of wallow in a certain sensibility, and this one's right there as well. It's also nice to have at least one actress in here, Janet Margolin, who I adore. So she turns up in kind of a token role, but she's still great to have on board. Warlock is kind of a classic Western. I didn't used to appreciate this as much as I do now. Richard Widmark and Henry Fonda just hold this thing down like a couple of brilliant old pros. It is beautifully shot, has a great supporting cast. I mean, Anthony Quinn, for crying out loud, is one of your supporting actors. This is from 1959, early part of the widescreen era. It's just getting underway. Directed by the great Eddie Dmytryk, who was a teacher at USC of many, many friends of ours. Rather infamous for having testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee, but still author of many brilliant westerns and noirs, and really a great director of the era. So Henry Fonda once again plays, in one of his rare turns as a bad guy, plays a gunslinger who's supposed to, well, he's a bad guy, but he's a good guy too, right? So he's a dirty gunslinger who's been hired to do kind of a Seven Samurai type thing, which is clean up the town. And Richard Widmark plays the sheriff, so he's normally a bad guy. Here he plays a straight up good guy. So there's some interesting kind of casting against type in both cases. And Anthony Quinn, Dorothy Malone, a lot of great supporting people here. It's really, really good. It's a fun movie. It's really sharp. Baby the Rain Must Fall. This is and remember, all of these are limited edition releases on Blu-ray. Only a few thousand titles put out, so you've got to go to twilightimemovies.com or screenarchives.com and grab these while they exist. Baby the Rain Must Fall is a really, really wonderful drama by Robert Mulligan, produced by Alan Pakula, based on the Horton Foote play. Horton Foote also did the screenplay here, which cast Steve McQueen and Lee Remick in this very, very, very difficult story about a prison parolee and his estranged wife. And they both just, I mean, Steve McQueen, if you ever wonder if you ever think Steve McQueen, he's kind of square-jawed, not a very good actor, just kind of like, no, man, Steve McQueen could act. He could act, and he just does such a great job here. He does a beautiful, beautiful job. And this is kind of a follow-up film in many respects from 2 years earlier. So in 1962, as many people might remember, Horton Foote and Robert Mulligan and Alan Pakula all teamed up for To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
And here they're doing it again, except the source material here is not it's an actual Horton Foote play. And it's just really, this is just a beautiful, beautiful film. Has a great score by Elmer Bernstein. Beautiful cinematography by the brilliant Ernest Laszlo. It's a real gem, and it's really, really worth checking out. The last of the Twilight Time titles is Bandolero. This is one I'm a little bit slightly less enthused by. This has kind of a cult following. A lot of people really, really love this just because it's got a weird cast. Like, where else are you going to see Jimmy Stewart, Dean Martin, and Raquel Welch?
Yeah.
Who would ever say, there's a cast?
I don't even like the way that looks in my mind.
Well, I mean, look, they don't even fit together on the big.
No, it's no good. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a.
They're much older than her.
Yeah.
By the time they're making this movie, and so no, guys.
No, so this is from 1968. It's George Kennedy's in this too, and he's the only one that seems to know that it's not very, he's the only one that's not taking it seriously. You can tell in almost every scene, Dean Martin thinks, "I'm going to win an Oscar for this," and you look at George Kennedy's face, and you can tell that George Kennedy's thinking, "Just take the paycheck, bro. Just take the paycheck, man. Don't read too much into this. I've made a lot of these, but still, it wants to be Raquel Welch. They have to rescue her, right? It's like they have to bring her across the border, and it's a whole thing. But forget about that. It doesn't really matter. It thinks on some level that it's a peck and paw film, but it's not.
No.
But it is anyway. Bandolero. And then from Criterion, let me just go through these 4 Criterions real fast. Actually, go ahead, hit some TV.
Knock off the rest of this TV real
do
quick?
the TV.
Or a little bit, and then you can do the other.
Oh, yeah, I'll hit this.
Magnum PI Season 1. I got to tell you, when they started doing this thing where they would take the great, wonderful television series of my youth, not really, because I was an adult when all these shows were on, but nevertheless, Hawaii Five-0, for instance. Hawaii Five. The first thing I said was, what the hell are they doing this for? None of this, not going to work. Not going to work. Nobody, I'm so wrong. Hawaii Five-0, 2010 is when that series premiered. And it's still hanging around out there. This is season 1 of Magnum PI. I was all grumpy old man about this, too. The season 1 went pretty well. It's basically the same storyline. They got themselves a sort of a Latiny Magnum who can't really grow that mustache right yet. And then they got themselves a female Higgins. The rest of it is more or less the same. It's the stories they more or less stand alone. You know what it is. I still don't watch it, but apparently people do. So there you go. He got the same car, though. I'll give him that. Yeah. All 26 episodes of Public Defender, an absolutely fascinating series from the Philip Morris Playhouse that premiered in 1954. Public defenders, the notion of a thing called a public defender was new in 1964. The idea that people who could not afford an attorney could have for them appointed an attorney at the cost of the public. That was a brand new idea then. Thus, it made good fodder for a wonderful television series. That was really just about the everyday stories this one is based on real life events of the kind of things that public defenders had to deal with. Everything from just, general juvenile delinquency to vehicular homicide to actual accusations of murder. This new crop of lawyers going into this thing called public defense in 1954. Fascinating. Actually, wow. All kinds of wonderful guest stars from the period, including Hugh Beaumont, who of course played the father on Leave It to Beaver. You can see him there. You can see Glenn Lanigan. You can see John Quaylen. You can see Mary Beth Hughes. You can see Harry Carey Jr. And this very early television series from 1954. Super cool. 26 episodes. That's back when a television series was 26 episodes. And now it hovers between 8 and 12, maybe 13.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Wow. Man.
I just ordered the second season of that, so that's going to be in a few months. They got the second season.
It's got 2 seasons. Benedict Cumberbatch as Patrick Melrose in this fairly remarkable series, adapted from a series of books. He's basically, the series covers this young man from the time that he's born. From the time that he's a child, actually, and his rather difficult upbringing, through his time in New York, where he becomes pretty much addicted to just about everything a person can be addicted to going back to Britain. It's a really, really fabulous series. It's so dramatic, so wonderfully acted. all kinds of wonderful sort of. All kinds of just wonderful performances that you draw from Blythe Danner in the series, Hugo Weaving in the series. Just really, really good stuff. And Benedict Cumberbatch not playing Sherlock in any way whatsoever, or Doctor Strange either for that matter, but it's certainly not playing Sherlock, which I have accused him of doing sometimes when he was in movies or television shows that were not a Sherlock show. Mm-hmm. He'd bring that Sherlock thing. Yeah. Doesn't do that here at all. This was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. It really is quite good. Not much by way of of special features. There is a behind-the-scenes featurette and a 36-page booklet, which one might check into. Orange is the New Black to the max. Orange is the New Black. Season 6. You know how many episodes of Orange is the New Black I've seen?
No.
None. not a single one. Not a single one. And I don't really know why. I mean, I'm deeply aware of the series. I've seen all of the actors on the series in different programs and episodes of things outside of the Orange is the New Black series, but of this series, not a single episode I have seen. Nevertheless, special features include a featurette and a gag reel and an audio commentary with the cast and crew. Orange is the New Black, Season 6.
Sweet. All right, wrapping out the TV, and then I'll do a couple of Criterions. We did a giveaway last week for what we're going to review now, but the giveaway was to, so that we'd be in time for Father's Day. Paramount's release on Blu-ray, the 22nd season of South Park. Let me repeat, 22 seasons of South Park.
That means South Park has been drinking for a whole year now.
Everybody keeps focusing on The Simpsons. Now, The Simpsons is ready to be the longest-running primetime television show in history. It's about to pop past. I think it's equaled Law and Order, and now it's about to pop past Gunsmoke. So what everyone forgets is that South Park is hot on its heels. South Park has been going for 22 years. Matt and Trey are still able to make fun of stuff with bad animation every week after 22 years. Yeah. And you know what? The show just keeps ticking along. I think there are more hours. It's just ridiculous. These kids would have been all grown up now. I'd love to see Cartman as like a 40-year-old, but that's never going to happen. So they keep it going. Cartman and Kyle and Kenny and somehow that whole shtick just keeps going, and the commentaries are funny, and there's no end to current events that they get to make fun of, and they stick it to all of them, and the irreverence is just so refreshing, and the animation, they've got it down to a fine art. They really do. They just somehow keep making it work. So 22 seasons in, that continues to be a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. We also have the very bizarre 39-episode Jackie Chan Adventures series animated. This was never very good, but I know people who really, really like it. I remember when Jackie was very excited to sort of throw his weight behind this, but it really, I don't know. It's not. They think that it's an anime style show, but it really isn't. And he goes.
No, it's like a Saturday morning American cartoon.
It is a total Saturday morning American cartoon. He's looking for these talismans with his little niece, who's only there to appeal to the kids, and then there's these secret police, and it winds up basically just being an excuse to do a lot of animated fighting, which doesn't really ever enthrall. I mean, Jackie's great in live action. I don't know why you need an animated Jackie, but anyway. And they've got a couple of Scooby-Doo titles: the best of the new Scooby-Doo, the Lost Episodes, and the new Scooby-Doo movies, the Almost Complete Collection. The best of is on DVD. The Almost Complete Collection is on Blu-ray. And we talked last week about Scooby-Doo teaming up with Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges and Batman and Robin. Yep, there we go. Don Knotts.
There they are. Don Knotts.
There we go. There's Don Knotts. There's your
I
animated
remember
Don Knotts.
that episode specifically.
It's utterly bizarre. Look, there's Batman and Robin.
Because he's not only playing Don Knotts, he's playing Barn.
Yeah, he's playing Barney.
He's playing Barney is who he's playing. Yeah. He's not just being Don Knotts. Yeah.
Nonsense. And I mean, Phyllis Diller and Sonny and Cher. It's completely bizarre. So anyway, Speed Buggy even shows up. It's just none of this makes any sense.
Speed Buggy, oh my God.
I know, right? That's all I remember about Speed Buggy. So anyway, this is just beyond silly. The Harlem Globetrotters. I'd forgotten about that. Remember the Harlem Globetrotters?
Oh yeah, the cartoon. Yeah, the cartoon.
Good grief. So anyway, and then on you get It's like Scooby-Doo meets Genie on the Lost. Forget it. It's so silly. So silly. All right, here are our Criterions this week.
All
You're
righty.
really going to want to clean off the shelf. Got some fantastic ones, all on Blu-ray. Director-approved Claire Denis edition of Let the Sun Shine In with Juliette Binoche. Claire Denis is an amazing director. This is a wonderful, wonderful teaming of talents. So Juliette Binoche basically plays a woman who is... she has her love life is a disaster, and she this is basically just an odyssey following this one woman in her quest to find love and how it leads her into all of these disastrous relationships. It's purely a character study. But it's a super film. It's just beautifully acted, beautifully directed. Claire Denis can do absolutely no wrong by me.
Indeed.
On the other end of the spectrum, from another era, is Swing Time, the George Stevens landmark musical with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. This changed everything, in case people don't know. This was 1936, which was the era that was sort of the peak of the Busby Berkeley moment, when you had a certain kind of musical. It was cinematic, and it was these enormous musical numbers, and it wasn't focused so much on actual stars who could sing and dance. That era of musical that becomes the trademark musical of Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and all of that, that doesn't happen until Swing Time. Swing Time changed everything. George Stevens, 1936. It is a wonderful Blu-ray. Has a new interview with George Stevens Jr. talking all about his dad. Audio commentary from 1986 featuring John Mueller, who wrote the book Astaire Dancing. And a great new program that's all called In Full Swing, which is all about the dancing in the film, the jazz. It's just look, if you don't buy this, you're out of your mind. Then we have One Sings, the Other Doesn't. Right after she passed, they were able to release this, a director-approved Agnes Varda edition. I'm just sorry she's not with us anymore. This was a wonderful Agnes Varda movie from 1977. And it takes place in 1960, about 61, 62. And it's essentially about these two opposite sides of society young women who come together and form a friendship, and then wind up being separated through a circumstance that I will not get into. And then they rediscover each other many, many years later. And it sort of follows them through this very tumultuous period in the 60s that defined modern feminism both in France and the United States, and how it sort of crystallizes in the lives and in the friendship of these two women. One Sings, the Other Doesn't is the title, and it's just absolutely delightful. Tons of extras on here, including a 1977 documentary called Women Are Naturally Creative, Agnes Varda. And if you love Agnes Varda, this is one you probably have not heard of, and you want to definitely rediscover it. And then lastly, on the Criterion front is David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
Oh, wow.
Now, a warning, Lynch does not like chapters on his movies, and there are none here. You get no chapters.
Nope.
It's you watch the movie straight through, because that's how Lynch wants it. But you know what? Come on, it's Blue Velvet. Dennis Hopper and in one of my favorite performances, just completely out of his mind. What my favorite exchange in thismovie is between, it's just such a stupid exchange, but it's so perfectly Lynchian, is when Dennis Hopper and Kyle MacLachlan are they're talking, and it's very tense, and Hopper says, "Why don't we go?" And Kyle says, "Go where?" He goes, "For a ride." No. How does it go? It goes, "Let's go." Go where? I don't want, no, for a ride. I don't want to go. Go where? For a ride. There you go. A ride. There's an idea. And it's this bizarre little like head game for a moment that just, and the way that they play it. And the dialogue is just so mundane and so inane. And yet somehow Hopper just elevates it. It's mad. It's crazy. So tons of extras on here. A feature-length meditation by Peter Bratz, which was shot on set during production. There's no other way to describe this. It's really interesting. And then there's a documentary from 2002 that's also feature-length called Mysteries of Love, which is all about the making of the film. an Angela Badalamenti interview, a 2019 documentary with interviews and where they go back to the shooting locations. It's just absolutely fantastic. There's like 4 hours, I think 4 or 5 hours of extras on here. It's just superb. Blue Velvet on Blu-ray. Doesn't get any better in the world of David Lynch.
Few of these?
Yeah, let's hit some of those.
Double feature here on Blu-ray from, what is this, Mill Creek, I believe? Yeah, from Mill Creek.
Yes.
Trigger Effect and Body Count. Trigger Effect from 1996, Body Count from 1998. Both fairly wicked movies that come out of the sort of post-noir period. Probably launched by Quentin Tarantino and Reservoir Dogs as the whole run of these movies after Quentin did that back in 91, 92. Trigger Effect I rather enjoyed. Cal McLaughlin, Elizabeth Shue, Dermot Mulroney, and my buddy Richard T. Jones in this very interesting movie, all about how predatory people become when the lights go out. So the lights go out and stay out for several days. And we watch what happens as these people's lives sort of cross one another, particularly when some of the things that they have going on are a little bit shady. It's really a beautifully well written movie that I really thoroughly enjoyed. Love about this movie. The movie's only 95 minutes long. I remember that very specifically. Now, Body Count, right? But I remember that very specific. Body Count, 1998. Some thieves try to rob this art gallery. Everything goes bad. They have to go on the run down south, right? Where they run into that sort of Southern law thing. This is a decent movie, not a great movie, not a fantastic movie, but a good movie. You know what I like about it? 85 minutes long. What the hell happened? When did they stop making movies?
85 minutes
85 minutes, 90 minutes long. When did it? That was a theatrically released movie at 85 minutes long. I believe in it, and I'm doing it right now. Mo Money from 1992. Damon Wayans, who wrote the movie way back in the day, opposite Stacey Dash, of course, in the movie. It's just about these sort of low-level con artist guys bumming around doing stuff. They gets a job at a credit card company, steals a credit card so he can go out and buy a bunch of stuff and impress Stacey Dash and gets himself in trouble. And it's just so funny. I can't believe we wore hats like the one Damon Wayans is wearing on the cover of this box here. The second part of this 90s comedy double feature, John Lovitz in High School High, which again was just funny, and it's only 86 minutes long. John Lovitz in this movie is playing this high school teacher. He has this a classroom full of juvenile delinquents, but if he wants to get with his co-teacher Tia Carrera, he's going to have to get those kids up to par, and he figures out a way to do it. It's a funny movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. Mo Money, by the way, 89 minutes, 86 minutes, 85 minutes. I'm detecting the theme about the 90s.
Yeah.
I think the 90s we had less tolerance for hanging around. And anyway, this double feature features Julia Roberts and Susan Sarandon and Ed Harris and Stepmom. And at the bottom half of the bill, Michelle Pfeiffer in The Deep End of the Ocean did the junkets for both of these movies. I have a black and white photograph. Remember they gave us actual publicity packages, photos and everything in it with slides. Everything. It was so cool. And I got Michelle Pfeiffer to sign a black and white photo of Michelle Pfeiffer for me. It's around here someplace. Stepmom, Susan Sarandon's divorced from Ed Harris. She finds out she's dying. Ed has a girlfriend, photographer played by the still very young and lovely Julia Roberts. And basically, Susan Sarandon is going to find out whether or not this chick is going to be a good enough person to be, the stepmom to her kids. And rather than doing this sort of ordinary thing that the ex does with the new wife, she gets to know her, and they become friends. Deep End of the Ocean. That was a mediocre movie directed by Uli Grossberg. Treat Williams, Michelle Pfeiffer, Whoopi Goldberg in this movie, I recall. It was adapted from sort of a pulp novel from back in the day. A family is sort of like thrown for a loop when their son, played by Ryan Merriman in the film, who had been kidnapped 9 years earlier, shows up. They move to this small town, and it turns out that a kid who lives up the street is the son who was kidnapped. And it's all about how it throws the family for a loop. Interesting story. Made a better book than it did a movie. And out of that series now, we just have a Blu-ray DVD for Al Pacino and Johnny Depp, and Johnny Depp's last decent movie, Donnie Brasco. And I really do believe this is Johnny Depp's last decent movie. I didn't like that one he did about what's his name, the
no, I didn't either.
With the rubber nose. No.
Yeah.
And this is a neat deep cover movie about a cop that goes deep cover into the mob, makes friends with a mob guy. Played by Al Pacino. They become deep buddies, and the entire time he's undercover. This is all about what's going to happen when it all comes out and goes wrong. And Heck in this film, as I recall, directed by Mike Newell. Intense, tight little film, and as I say, the last time Johnny Depp did any serious acting.
All right, we're gonna wrap out from the sublime to the ridiculous. Starting with 3 silent classics here. One is a Cohen Film Collection release. This is the Buster Keaton Collection Volume 1, new 4K restorations of the General and Steamboat Bill Jr. Wow. Now, these have previously been out on Blu-ray from Kino, different transfers, but this is Cohen. Cohen, of course, got the Rohauer Collection some years ago, where they inherited all of these silent classics in different with different elements. So they're the same films, but they're done differently. And honestly, I gotta be honest, I think you should have both. I think you should have the Blu-ray, the Kino Blu-ray, and you should have the Cohen Blu-ray, because they all have there are aspects that are great in each of them, and there are extras that are great in each of them. And here you get original scores by Carl Davis, which are just wonderful. The General, of course, is just beyond compare. It's absolutely fantastic. This includes reflections on the General and Buster Keaton, the Luminary featurettes. And they're just both of these are incomparable. You got to get this. So that's on Blu-ray from Kino, and then we also have from Flicker Alley a couple of fantastic Blu-ray silent classics. The first is The Last Warning from 1929. This is the last film directed by the great silent director Paul Laney. This is 78 minutes long. See, but it's absolutely wonderful. And this is like meta within meta within meta. It's based on a Broadway play about a murder that takes place during a Broadway play, which they never find the body, and then years later, after the theater is abandoned, a guy comes back to restage the play with the original cast. That play within a play, along with a play that was turned into a play, has been made into a silent movie in 1929.
You'll love it.
And it's really, really cool. It's just absolutely beautiful. Came from the Universal Library. They restored it completely. Sensational camera work and photography. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's a legendary silent classic. Really great to have this in such great condition again. And then also we get The Man Who Laughs from 1928, which is famous because the artwork of this, and this is based on a Victor Hugo novel about a guy who was orphaned and then is punished by the king because his dad was a bad dude by having this horrible grin carved into his face. And the depiction of that in this Paul Laney directed film, and this is the one that Paul Laney is most famous for, it's that image there that they have on the cover that inspired the Joker.
The Joker, yeah.
And the Joker's, straight up inspiration. You look at that, you're like, why do they keep casting like all these other actors as the Joker? That's the guy. Go find that guy. Find that guy.
That's the concept.
That's the guy. That's because he inspired it. So that's the concept. That's the way to go. And anyway, the story itself is very, very tragic. It's not like a comic book thing or anything, but it's vintage Victor Hugo. There's a reason they haven't done it again too, because it just sort of lends itself to this very, very expressionistic German style. So it's absolutely
despotic
wonderful.
kings in 1690 could just be brutal,
horrible. So anyway, it's really, really terrific. The Man Who Laughs, 1928, and then to the ridiculous. We are going to go out, ladies and gentlemen, with Can't Stop the Music, 1980s Nancy Walker flop.
Yeah, it was just
okay. There's a class of films from this era that I adore. And it begins with Car Wash, and it includes Xanadu, and
TGI Friday,
and Thank God It's Friday,
yeah, Thank God It's Friday,
and it includes Can't Stop the Music, and there are like 2 or 3 others. I want to say
might count The Wiz in there.
The Wiz, Sgt. Pepper's One of the Hearts Club Band. Yeah. So all of these kind of belong to this moment of really, really bad disco era musicals.
Xanadu?
Xanadu for sure.
Gotta be,
I
right?
love Xanadu. So, but Can't Stop
They're
the
terrible, but I love them all.
I do too. Can't Stop the Music was directed by Nancy Walker, the only thing she ever directed. Nancy Walker basically was, a character actress who did a lot of soap commercials.
Who even then was probably 90.
Yeah, for sure. But in any case, it's a really, really, really silly movie. Primarily distinguished because it's got the it's got the Village People in it. And it also has Bruce Jenner in it, which is kind of weird now.
Yeah, now that's just that. I mean, that is just so.
It takes this movie to a whole new level.
Like,
you watch this then, and you go, "Oh, I think I see some things going on in this movie that I should have seen at the time." Steve Guttenberg is in this thing, of all people. Alan Carr produced this, so if you're ever wondering why Alan Carr completely tanked the Oscars by having Rob Lowe dance with Snow White, if you've seen this movie, you understand.
Yeah, his
Makes
sensibility
sense.
there. Yeah.
That's it. So, anyway, pretty terrific movie. I enjoy it. It includes an audio commentary with Alan Carr and director-producer Jeffrey Schwartz and Bruce Valanche.
Yeah.
The very campy Bruce Valanche. And a trailer and another interview. Check it out. Can't Stop the Music. It's terrible, but it's a load of fun. With that, we will see you guys next week.